back. And I don't know. Now as an adult, I don't really see like the new kids like really doing that now. So in a way, I'm like, damn, you guys are missing out. Like, it doesn't have to be just baseball. It can be just any activity, but like physically doing something outdoors that is positive, that is productive, staying out of trouble, because it's important to have these outlets to, you know,
Yeah, I
stay
agree.
away from trouble and whatnot.
And I do think that I don't think kids go out as much.
Yeah.
And I think that the parent is to blame and the kids
No
are as
way.
well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dive into that a little bit further, but I don't necessarily think that like a kid being glued to a screen is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing when they overdo it.
You end up getting B's. I never knock the hustle because she's get degrees, but I got check my fucking PhD. I spit.
What's up, guys? This is episode number 2 of the Encoded Podcast, part of the Encoded Media.
Yes,
My name
sir.
is Gilbert,
Yes, sir. My name is Kelvin from Encoded Media.
and we out here to promote different messages, different conversation, different topics that we feel are related and may need to be highlighted and showcased in our communities as well. This is a new format for us. We have a studio right here. We have some representation of things that we enjoy and adore. As you can see, we're both Dominican. We have a baseball glove. This is Kelvin's glove, Wilson. We have 2 vinyls. We have J. Cole. We have Tupac. We have Patron right here. We have Domino's. We have Aaron Judge bobblehead.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you can see, guys, we're here. We're trying to showcase different elements that represent us and bring it to life, man. And as we deep dive in, we want to speak on your youth, your experience growing up in Dykeman, playing baseball as a kid in New York City, comparing it to how it is now. Me myself, I was born in the Dominican Republic, as many of you might know. I came here when I was 7 years old, and I'm also going to share my experiences growing up in the Bronx, and maybe we find some common ground, some similarities, some differences, and we go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, brought to you by Encoded Media. If you guys like the content that we are putting out, make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Make sure that you guys send some questions at Encoded Media LLC. We would love to highlight those at a future episode. Encoded Media LLC at gmail.com. Make sure you guys send us your questions, and we would love to get the community involved. So make sure you guys follow us. And yeah, let's get it started. So where do you want to leave off? Where do you want to start off this conversation at, Gil?
So you were born in Dykeman, right?
Yes, sir.
What area? What other area were you born in? You was born here?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Dykeman all 30 years of life. Pretty much all that I've known. Because this is all I've known, it's pretty much made me, during my upbringing, I felt like I was very much like closed-minded to a lot of things. It wasn't until I think like COVID that it really brought my attention to other parts of the world in terms of like other people's opinions, the things that they go through on a day in and day out basis. But yeah, Dykeman is where I was born and raised, all 30 years of life. It's pretty much all I knew up until this point.
And obviously, you live in here. This is a very large Dominican community. Of course, there's a lot of small businesses. A lot of people that migrate come into New York City. They also reside in Washington Heights and Dykeman, Uptown. Myself, I came and I moved into the Bronx. So yeah, there is a lot of Dominican community, but it's also a lot of different other cultures as well. I would say still predominantly likely majority Dominican, but probably not like Dykeman and Dykeman area. So I had to deal with some barriers where like I had to like be forced to speak English at a young age. I had to learn and I had to adapt. Um, I'm glad I can speak for myself that I'm glad that I was able to integrate myself into the culture, be more culturally inclined. When I first came, like even when I was watching cartoons, I would try to watch it in English to make sure that I get the concept, I get the phrases, the tone of words, and comparing it. Going to school at a young age. Um, I did bilingual my first 2 years when I came to this country.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I did 3rd grade and 4th grade. I did bilingual class, and then in 5th grade, I was given the choice to either continue bilingual or go with a full English class. And I felt like I was ready, and I just went English from 5th grade onwards.
So is Spanish your primary language?
That's a hard question to answer, and the only reason I say that is because as the years have progressed, you tend to find yourself speaking more English, like whether you work, whether you go to school, whether you have associates and friends. So sometimes there's times where the Spanish language you kind of forget some formalities and whatnot. Like I still consider my Spanish really good, but you can tell that when I go travel back to DR or when I speak with elderly folks here in Spanish, my Spanish may sound like Americanized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Understood.
Like
Yeah.
I may forget some words in translation, but nonetheless, like I work in a field where I have to use my Spanish, and my Spanish is good enough and really well enough that I can communicate with people from different cultures, such as like Central America, South America. So I'm glad that I'm able to still maintain the Spanish, but I would say now probably English will probably be my primary right now.
Yeah.
I know that growing up, the difficulty was that when I knew Spanish more, I would try to translate everything in English back to Spanish in my mind mentally. And then before I respond, I would have to translate my thoughts in Spanish to English and then say it back. So there will sometimes either be a delay or I wouldn't pronounce certain things correctly because of that cultural shift, you know? Whereas a native speaker in English, they just, speak their thing and they just flow, you know? So it's a little challenge, because bullying is real, people bully you when you were little, you're different from folks and folks don't get your struggle or your story or your journey and you have to deal with that, and it's either you deal with it, you overcome it, you learn from it, or you fold. And a lot of people that I feel like now that are coming to this country, granted they are older, but not everyone tries to assimilate themselves to American culture. And like American culture doesn't only have to be white culture. You know what I mean? Like this country is so diverse that
America's culture.
America's culture
Yeah.
from a face value, you think it's just white people, but it's not necessarily like that. There's a lot of African Americans, there's Caribbeans here, there's West Indies people here, Central, Latinos, everything, so but it's still Americanized, in its own way. So I feel like that's a better route in my opinion. You have more connections, you expand yourself even more to the people that you talk to, and you can relate with people more, and you develop to open your mind more. You don't want to have a mindset where you just living by ignorance, by not knowing, because you can be ignorant not on purpose, but you just don't know any
You
better,
don't know any better, right? Yeah.
So that's some of my experiences growing up here. You want to touch on yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the ignorance was definitely something that I was the fault of. Being a first generation Dominican, like my parents came from Dominican Republic. I don't
Yeah.
really have ties to Dominican Republic as I got older.
Mm.
Like in my childhood, I think I went to DR twice.
Oh wow.
Yeah, not really that often compared to like my peers, for example, that would go on a yearly basis or every other year or so
Mm.
on. I didn't really grow up like that. Now I'm the youngest of four. I could understand that by the time I was born, my parents must have been exhausted in terms of the parenting aspect of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like they probably introduced Dominican culture to like my sister and my older brothers and stuff like that. But by the time they got to me, they have already been in America for 20 years already. So they kind of separated themselves from like that Dominican culture. They became more Americanized in a way. So as a first gen Dominican, I was very close minded as to like what other cultures, what they do, how they speak, their culture, as to how they approach situations. Like one of the things that like was mind boggling to me is like the Muslim culture, for example. One of the things that they value is not owing people money or not falling into debt.
Yeah.
They're very they take that very, very seriously. Versus in Dominican culture, they have like sociedades where they
Yeah.
borrow money from different people, and then somebody borrows all those funds at once, and
It's
then
their turn in that week.
exactly
Or that
they're
month or whatever.
exactly.
Mhm.
So we come from that aspect of it. So learning from being a first generation and being open minded to other cultures has developed like my thought process and behind like I'm more accepting to other things. I'm much more well rounded when it comes down to different things, and I think that as we progress, whether it's first generation, second generation, we learn to adapt and accept those things, and we're able to teach our parents who came from those cultures how other cultures are more well, or how they function, or what they do and what to accept and how they are. So that was something I feel like I adapted early on. So.
And I feel like I can see how this can be a struggle too. Like parents, like our parents' generation, being born here though. Like I know peers that have parents that were born in America, so that's a whole different way of being raised, a whole different set of again integrating themselves into the culture. I feel like ideally parents that are born here, they tend to be more open minded with I guess, the choices the kids make or the activities the kids partake in. Whereas, immigrant parents have still that sense of cultural responsibility from back home. Certain customs, certain things that are seen acceptable over there are not here, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's also another layer of things that could become challenges for someone growing up here too.
Absolutely. Even adapting to like what's acceptable and what's not
Yeah.
nowadays. Like I said, first generation Dominican, like we were known to like getting hit with like sandals and belts and stuff like that. And then later on, we accepted that that's probably not the best way to discipline your child.
Yeah.
Like I look at like Caucasian parents and how much time they apply to their kids in terms of like learning literature. Like there are on many occasions I see where I'm walking through the park, I'm walking with my girlfriend and our dog through the park and everything, and we're overhearing conversations with people, and the way that they discipline their child is a lot differently than when I was disciplined when I was younger. And in ways, I wanted to adapt the way they discipline them. They tell them what's right from wrong, but they do it in a much respectful way
Yeah.
or in a much more mature way. And they let the child know what is it that they did wrong and what they can do better or what's the right step versus just hitting them. And then, you kind of have to learn what's right and what's not from then. It's a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like, for example, like me, I came here in 2004. This is actually gonna be my 20th year in September.
I didn't even know that you were.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, bro,
Yeah.
because I guess either my vibe or behavior, I don't know. Again, like I said, like I just acclimated myself really well.
Yeah.
But despite this, like I did go to DR every couple summers. I also, now that I have gotten older, I appreciate more Dominican music, like old school bachata, merengue, típico, dembow, all of that, because it still keeps me updated to like the struggles of what people go through or the stories these artists are conveying.
Yeah.
I also follow like Dominican media on Instagram, on Twitter, news to find things that are recurring. I follow stories on like TikTok and not people that create skits, and that's a way for me to still stay in touch with my roots and whatnot. And I appreciate going back to the art now as an adult more because you get to understand like the changes. You get to you get to ask questions. You get to do your history. You get to retain that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and like growing up in Dykeman, I felt like I was blessed with the fact that even though I didn't have ties to the country directly, like I didn't necessarily visit that country on a yearly basis or so. Um, being growing up in Dykeman, or more specifically Washington Heights area, it kept me grounded to those roots. Like whether it's bachata or merengue playing through the windows and stuff like
Even
that.
the icy people, the mango cherry,
Exactly.
tamarindo, yeah.
Everybody that's within this neighborhood, like they kept me grounded in this. They gave me a little bit of piece of DR. You know what I'm saying? And I'm very appreciative of that as I got older. And I feel like it's somewhat kept me tied to the roots, but it's also like developing those relationships as well. Like I was the type of person where I only spoke Spanish in my house. I never wanted to speak Spanish outside of the house. Once I became a lot more comfortable with that, I began to understanding that like what we say in English is the same thing that they say but in Spanish.
Yeah.
Whether it's like similar humor, similar phrases and stuff like that. So it made me understand and appreciate that culture that much more. So yeah.
So let's touch on baseball a little bit. At what age would you say you started playing baseball here?
I started playing baseball, I'm gonna say like 5, 6 years old. But at the same time, baseball was not really like my number one sport. I think it was basketball at that
Oh,
time.
word?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think at that point, I wanted to become a basketball player. I had all these VHS tapes
Yeah.
of like, whether it was like basketball bloopers or I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, and I had a lot of Jordan tapes as well as, I'm pretty sure a lot of 90s babies had at that point. So I actually wanted to become a basketball player. How I leaned into baseball was at that age when you're playing basketball at such a young age and they're teaching you the sport. I learned that you can essentially play a whole game of basketball without even getting the opportunity to get the ball. You
Yeah.
have like ball hogs or
Yeah. Yeah.
people just controlling the game and essentially you're just running
You're
back
doing
and forth.
cardio.
Exactly.
Just doing cardio in game.
And I wanted to be involved in more of a team sport, but a sport that gave me an opportunity to shine.
The opportunity to show your ability and your skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought baseball was probably the best option because, yeah, it's a group of 9 individuals on a baseball diamond, but you do get that opportunity to shine, whether it's on the defensive end but more specifically offensively, everybody gets a chance to hit.
Everybody has a turn.
Exactly, everybody has a turn.
Yeah.
And that's what introduced me more into taking baseball a little bit more seriously.
Did you have any influence, like your parents, peers?
Actually, a lot of the influences that I had were people from around the neighborhood. Actually, I had baseball players that they played collegiately. Some ended up making it, like Pedro Alvarez was somebody that grew up across the street from me and stuff.
That lefty swing.
That lefty swing, right?
Yeah.
All-star too. So just hearing about them in the neighborhood, wanting to follow into their footsteps, playing at our local schoolyard, and they would pass by, give me pointers and stuff like that.
Oh, you would do that too?
Yeah.
Growing up? Like, they pick up baseball, like, in the schoolyard,
yeah.
a bunch of kids in the community.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. I experienced that too in the Bronx. Yeah.
Cool.
Because I have friends that didn't experience that, but I feel like that's also, like, I can't, like, I cherish those moments too. Like, it doesn't always have to be in the field, but it's like a sandlot version of baseball, and you still spend time. Like, I used to do that a lot on Saturdays usually, like on my school in the backyard. And we'll just play for hours, play from kids from other communities sometimes. I go to baseball field, yo, bring your glove, bro.
Yeah.
Let's do that, and I feel like that's also part of appreciating the sport too, and those experiences, staying out of trouble because you're staying busy too.
Yeah.
So that's some of my childhood memories that I can relate as well. And I just miss those moments, right?
Yeah. What version of baseball I actually enjoy playing, really out of the blue, but like Platica.
Oh,
I used to love that.
It's like another version of cricket for those that don't know.
Yeah, it's like another version of cricket, but we played on the street where, like, what we used to use is like 2 gallons as like the base.
Yeah.
And then we used to use like broomsticks.
Yeah.
Like so we used to literally play on the street. This is back in like New York culture, like the prime era.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. The pumps were out. The fire hydrants was open. Everybody was out on the street. This was back before like social media. This is back when people were more open to engaging into the neighborhood and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So those are moments that I really cherish because those are little nuggets that I was able to apply to my life, whether it's like, playing responsibly, having like that more of a competitive edge, whether it's like me playing with like people from the block, as you want to say.
Yeah.
And honestly speaking, the best advice that I've ever gotten playing wise was in those environments, and I cherish it. The reason why is because when you're playing for a league, those coaches and stuff, they're there because they want to, but that's kind of what their job is.
Yeah.
If you're playing out of schoolyard, if you're playing on the street and somebody takes the time out to tell you what is it that you're doing right or wrong and what you can do better, to me, that was much more impactful. Because you could have been doing anything else in the world right now. You could have just been walking by and not even giving me 2 cents of information, anything like that. But the fact that you chose that moment to make a 5-year-old, 10-year-old Kelvin a lot better, like, I cherish those moments a lot.
Yeah.
So, that's just growing up in Washington Heights, the culture. I guess we adapted that from Dominican Republic, but.
And at times too, like I used to play, I don't know if you remember. You remember Models?
Yeah.
Yo, shout out Models, man. Like there used to be Models on Fordham, and I'm like, you don't appreciate it when it was there. But now looking back at it, like it's like a sports store. You could get anything like quick. Oh, I got a game today. I'm missing this. Let me just go to Models real quick. Yeah. I miss it. But back then, I remember what I was gonna say. Like I used to go to the parks a lot too. I used to buy like handballs. In Models, they used to sell like a plastic replica of like a baseball bat, but it was plastic.
Yeah.
And it would say Louisville Slugger.
Yeah. I remember.
And I used to buy the gray baseball that it was like $1 or $2 in the store. And like that would be another version of playing pickup baseball too. It would be like 1-on-1. And you run to the bases that you create, and you gotta beat the ball that gets there, So that's something I would do to pass time. I'll play kickball too.
Yeah, that would help too.
I used to go to the park to play basketball sometimes. And again, these are memories that I feel like I enjoy. I wish I could get them back. And I don't know. Now as an adult, I don't really see like the new kids like really doing that now. So in a way, I'm like, damn, you guys are missing out. Like, it doesn't have to be just baseball. It can be just any activity, but like physically doing something outdoors that is positive, that is productive, staying out of trouble, because it's important to have these outlets to,
I agree.
Stay away from trouble and whatnot.
And I do think that, I don't think kids go out as much.
Yeah.
And I think that the parent is to blame and the kids
No way.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive into that a little bit further, but I don't necessarily think that like a kid being glued to a screen is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing when they overdo it.
Yeah,
Like as I got older, there was a lot of valuable information,
yeah,
baseball wise or life wise in
yeah.
general, that I was able to obtain that information. I thought was very valuable. And I wish I had those resources back when I was playing. Like nowadays, like back then, I remember like I didn't have access to a camera. You know?
But you now, for example, record softball. We play in the softball league, guys.
Yeah.
So you're now able to record, for example, your softball clips, and you can see what you're doing, good or bad. Whereas back then, we may not. It wasn't even a thought to even do that,
Right? Or we didn't know any better.
and we didn't know any
that was a
better,
resource.
or our parents or people that was entrusted for us to look after us or whatever.
They
didn't have
know any better.
exactly.
Exactly. They
I
didn't know
wish
any
I had
better.
those tools in a sense, like, oh, maybe in game I could rewind this. Yo, what did I do last at bat or something? You know what I mean?
Or even on a confidence level too. Like
Yeah.
not only are you able to get like real time feedback as to what is that you're doing right or wrong, but in a way, like realistically, I didn't know visually how I played until I started playing softball.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I honestly,
Oh.
I didn't have a clue as to how I looked. I didn't have a clue as to, you know, whether it was me fielding a ball or me hitting. I had absolutely no clue how I looked. I was just going off of what people perspective was on me, or like what was being told to me. I honestly didn't know visually how I played until I started recording softball. And you know, like back then, I wish somebody told me that in order for me to get noticed, I had to put out content.
Oh man, bro, I think about this all the time.
Yo,
bro.
one of the biggest regrets of my life. Like I know there's
submitting
a lot of people,
videos too of your own like showcase and whatnot. Yeah, yeah.
That's something that to this day, when I see a young baller playing or whatever the case is, that's my number one advice is to stay confident and to put yourself out there in terms of like create video content and stuff like that and put yourself out there. Because the school that you might be wanting to go to, which could be the University of Miami, they might not look at you, but King's College in Pennsylvania might, and they're Division One also. You know, like little things like that. I wish I knew that, but like I said, like my parents try to do. My parents, I was very lucky to have two parents that really supported me. There's a lot of people that don't have that type of support system, and I'm very grateful for my parents because even though they didn't know any better, they would still be able to, you know, scrape those dollars together to put me in these programs to help propel me, and I'm so appreciative of that. At the time, it was very difficult for me to see that because you don't think about any of that as a child.
No.
But as I got older, I'm much more appreciative because of essentially that's where I got my skills from. Yes, I wish I was guided a little bit better, like I said, in terms of like recording content and reaching out to different schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful for what they did. How about you? Did you feel like you had that same support system?
I feel like I had a support system in terms of like they did the best they could. In terms of sometimes going to travel ball and you gotta pay. My dad would like commit to try to take me to games as much as he could after work.
Yeah.
He would even try to coach me, and that's a way for him and me to bond and spend more hours together. You know, a lot of peers that are close to mine, like they also had an appreciation for my father too because he also coached me. So if he coaches me, he's coaching my teammates as well. You know,
and he also kept it fair too. There's a lot of parents that tend to have their biasness towards their kids.
Yeah.
And you might understand that their kids are probably that good, but at the same time, you have 13 other kids that
they may need some development and some guidance.
Need some development.
Confidence.
I'm gonna be honest. Maybe some of those kids are not gonna be pursuing this, but at that time you don't really know, you know. But those kids might need a little bit more attention or a little bit more development that they might not get if their coach is also the parent to one of the players on the team.
Yeah.
You know, so your take on that?
I also did enjoy like my dad sometimes like not sometimes he would try to give me the equipment that I needed, you know, like bats every like year or two, the cleats, the uniforms. I just wish the only thing is that he was more knowledgeable in terms of like how to best promote my ability in terms of connection that he may have needed to know. Maybe is knowing coaches in schools, knowing the right leagues to put me in, like that. But that's like the business side of the sport, you know, and not everybody has that.
Not a lot of people have access to know that information. It's a very like if you know, you know.
You have to have the education to have cognitive skills and whatnot, you know?
Like if you look at kids in DR right now, they're getting signed at 13, 14 years old. But how did they get up to that level? You know what I'm saying? And it's because their parents, the coaches, the systems that they're put in provide them with the best guidance or the best path possible.
And they're also more desperate too, so they're going all in or
Well,
nothing.
it's different in DR because that's essentially a part of their economy is having that professional.
That's the way to get out.
Exactly, that's the way to get out. Exactly,
Yeah.
not to just Dominican Republic, but to Cuba, for example. Japan have their own leagues as well. Let me ask you a separate question. How comfortable did you feel, more or less, when your father specifically, knowing that he was a coach? How comfortable were you being receptive to his feedback? Another part of the question is his guidance. Did you feel like it was the best? Because I have an actual opinion on that I've actually never discussed to my dad. And to be honest with you, I don't think I ever will for personal reasons. But to go back to the question, how receptive were you to his feedback? And how much did you agree with the guidance that he tried to set for you?
So there was times that we would clash, again, within the sport. Like, my dad, of course, like, intentions wise, he wanted the best of me. So, like, let's say for example, this a game I went 2 for 4, I hit the ball well. You know, he'll be like, oh, but you could have went 3 for 4, 4 for 4. But I get it from a parent's point of view. He wants the best out of me. He knows he knows I can do that because he's seen me do before. So sometimes I feel like he was a little too hard on me, like expecting perfection.
Yeah.
So that added a little bit of pressure, and there was times where I kind of didn't want him to come to my games, but not because, he doesn't know the game. It's because I just felt like it was a little bit over critiqued.
Yeah.
But I also respect the times that I did do well, and he would praise me, or the times when I would do wrong, and he would push me in a certain way. I would be receptive to the feedback. Like, let's say, don't chase like a certain pitch this here. You're taking your leg out. He'll try to work on my mechanics pitching when I used to pitch, like, control your pace, your breathing, focus on the hitter, forget about the runner sometimes. So in hindsight, I always appreciate it. Now, as an adult reflecting back, I always appreciate it because, again, it's a lot of kids that don't grow up with fathers, bro.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have a father that critiques me than have no father, bro.
Yeah. Or there are kids that grow up with moms, but no offense, but what does the mom know about that field? They're probably not that experienced or knowledgeable.
And I always say this too before you answer yours, like, there are mothers that play the role of mother and fathers a lot. Actually, it's more common than you think.
Shout out to the single parents.
Facts. The only thing I would say about that is, like, no matter how much a mother tries to raise you or guide you, she still can't replace the role of a father.
Yeah.
And what you can learn as a father, especially if you're a son.
Vice versa, a father can't replace the mother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I only said that mostly because a lot of the time, more than not, the kid lives with the mother,
Yeah, unfortunately.
In a single situation household.
That's more common nowadays.
That's more common. But yeah, for sure. But yeah, I always appreciated it, and he invested in me as much as he could. The only thing is that I wish I was able to be put in a position to go to, like, perfect game tournaments.
Yeah.
So at least my attributes will be listed, like, recorded officially in the website, so it could be looked at. I wish I had a little more guidance in terms of, like, what schools should I have gone to after middle school, what leagues to get noticed, just a little more in that aspect. But I appreciate everything, to be honest.
Yeah. I can relate to a lot of what you said. Like my dad, my mom was always very supportive. She was very motherly, which I'm very, very grateful. And the times that, like, she felt like she needed to share her opinion, she did. And I feel like, but I also felt like a lot of the times that she tried to share her opinion was to protect me as her youngest son.
Yeah.
And the dynamic that I share with my family is that even though I'm the youngest, I never wanted to be treated as such. I always wanted to be like, treat me as I am, not just because I'm the youngest that you have to limit me to certain things.
Yeah.
And I felt like because it was just so overly protective, they were scared to expose me to those sorts of things. But the biggest teacher in life is failure. And if you don't go through failure, then you're not going to know what works and what doesn't. Now, with my dad, I feel like he did everything possible with the knowledge that he had. But the knowledge that he was obtaining was knowledge that he would get from your regular game of dominoes from the guys that he would play with on the corner,
I get what you're saying.
But it's just like, pops that are 56 years old.
Yeah.
They just hear what they hear on La Noticia or like what they see on MLB Network, whatever the case is, or from what their friends are talking about in DR. He did the most that he can, but I will say this. I felt like growing up with baseball, I felt like I had a lot of pressure to succeed, and I feel like that took a lot of the fun out of it for me very, very early.
There was I could relate. There's times that I probably didn't feel like the game was as fun, but that comes with the pressure.
That comes with the pressure, and the
Yeah.
pressure is mainly coming from, like, from my perspective, I think I had it pretty brutal, to be honest with you. I mean, there are other people who might go through either similar situations or even something a lot worse than I did. But I remember for every error that I made, like, I would get punished for it, like, sincerely. And it would be like errors that from like balls going through the wickets and like tough hops that hit me on the collarbone. And there's nothing you can do about that, you know. Like I can be like set in front of the ball, and the ball would just take a bad hop, and I'm in front of it. But my dad wouldn't take that. I think he would apply so much pressure because he's investing so much money into.
Yeah, he wants perfection at that point.
Yeah, and it was tough. So I feel like there were times where even though I had a good game, where I remember there's one time in particular in Van Cortlandt in the league in Van Cortlandt Park. Shout out to Van Cortlandt Park. This is where actually we met. I remember like there was a time frame where I literally went 12 for 12.
Oh wow!
I went 12 straight clean.
Well, you was locked in.
And the reason why I was even on that roll was because I was competing with my best friend who was on the team, and I remember he was bragging about having more hits than I would. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm worrying too much about stats. Let me just do my thing. And next thing you know, once I just let go of that competition and just started believing in my talent, next thing you know, I go for 12 for 12. I ended up pitching on one of those games, and I was throwing a complete game in Van Cortlandt. I remember this like if it was yesterday. I was throwing a complete game. It was a 7-inning game. I'm at 6 2/3. I'm like 1 out away
from the whole game.
Right. It wasn't a shutout. I think they might have scored like 2 runs or something.
Yeah, but you was cruising.
I was cruising.
Yeah.
And I remember we ended up losing the game because I left the game bases loaded, and then whoever ended up closing the game ended up blowing the game.
Yeah.
We came home. I get my Xbox 360 taken away.
Oh damn.
Yeah, like I had a pair of Cool Grade 4s, some Jordan Cool Grade 4s that I used to rock to school. My dad literally sent them to DR as punishment because he felt as though that because I'm focusing on
other things,
like style, or I'm not focused on the game of baseball, and that's where my focus should be. I'm playing too much Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and that's why I'm staying up late the night before, and that's why I'm not getting a good night's sleep for this game that he's spending his money on. And bro, that killed me. Because it's like no matter how I should be performing at the game, it's the game at the end of the day.
It takes the innocence out of the game.
Yeah, and it made me question, like, dude, if I'm
do I really want this?
Yeah, do I really want this? I'm getting punished for any little thing. I remember for Perfect Game USA, I remember I cried for like a week straight to my parents to please allow me to go.
Oh, you ever got to go?
Yeah, I got to go, but that was after begging. And luckily, my brothers and my sister actually vouched for me. And they said, in order for him to grow, you need to let him go. And because they were able to vouch for me, my parents understood that we can't keep this 16-year-old kid locked up in the house every day. Bro, I wasn't even allowed to chill with my friends alone. Like, I'm talking about leaving the crib.
I had curfew, too, when I was younger.
I had curfew also. I wasn't even allowed to go out and chill with my friends without a parent being present until I was like 17, bro. I was that sheltered as a kid. And for better or worse, that's what led to me being very close-minded and involving other cultures, seeing different
because that's kind of passed down. And it's not even because you want to, it's because culturally that's just being passed down to you.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I know. That's what I'm being taught. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that after I went away for college and I was able to develop my own individualism, I feel like, I was able to learn a lot more, but I do think that I learned a little bit too late.
I can relate with that a bit too. Like I said, like I had curfews. Yeah. Like if I had to be somewhere, I had to let them know where I would be, come home at a certain time.
Which is normal,
Hey, as a parent, I get it, man, because there's a lot of dangers out here. But, there's also there should be some type of compromise somewhere, Like trust is important. Trust, man. And like even like sleepovers was like
a big no for me.
It was shaky, like like they could come over, but I wasn't really like sleeping over elsewhere. It had to be like somebody really trustful, or like my parents had to know their parents and they had to prove it basically.
Which is understandable.
Yeah,
you never want to put your child in an
unsafe environment, unstable. Yeah.
So it was. We definitely understand, but if you look at nowadays, like I'm seeing more kids out here on the streets. Like I know there's some topics that you want to dive into as to like what kids are doing nowadays, but I'm seeing more kids out here, 12, 13 years old, with no parents.
Yeah,
For
bro.
better or worse, there are some kids that are very responsible, and then you find your kids that are not.
Yeah, and even in our communities, like I see, like even when I'm coming from work on my way home, like I be seeing kids posting on their blog, and I'm like, me as an adult, but I'm still not old. Like I'm still young enough that I can still kind of relate to certain struggles. I'm like, you have no business being there right now. Like, obviously, I'm not gonna say nothing because that's you. You choose your own path.
Yeah.
But from an observation point of view, it's like you have no business doing that or being there. You have older guys influencing you to do this or do that for validation, and it's likely not gonna turn out good, But I also part of the struggle and the problem is just that I feel like there's not enough resources publicly or free or affordable for kids nowadays.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like a lot of kids are stuck behind screen times or the gangbanging. It's like there's no medium, there's no somewhere in between,
Yeah.
And considering that a lot of programs are being cut from funding for public schools too, that affects a lot of kids and after school programs,
Yeah. One of the biggest keys that I see that can contribute to that is I feel like and this is more or less New York City specifically. Like I travel on occasion to Florida quite
Yeah.
often, and my girlfriend's from Florida, and I'm always asking questions about her upbringing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of the resources that I see in those schools on the South, more or less, is like they have more of an influence when it comes to sports as an outlet or creative like theater and stuff like that. And those sorts of things are promoted more in those states.
Yeah, it's needed over
Whether
here.
New York is more about like, what's trending right now, whether it's apparel or the latest music or whatever trends that you see on social media and stuff like that. Like you mentioned Models and Sports Authority. If you look at New York City, those sports stores are no longer existing here in New York City. I used to work for Nike, and I raised the question as to why is it that there's not a lot of those department stores here. And one of the answers that I got from a higher up in Nike was New York is not considered a sports town or an athletic town.
From an athlete's point of view.
From an athlete's point of view,
Yeah.
it's more of a swag type of environment.
That's why also a lot of kids move to other states in the developing ages to play sports,
Yeah, exactly.
Try to move to Florida, Jersey, PA, Texas, Cali,
People are always going to say that, the weather is a factor. But if you were to create a system where schools have their gyms open, which is one of the ideas that I've thought of for a long time.
Come on, bro.
In,
Hell yeah.
In Florida, there's football fields, soccer fields.
They have space. They commit to the space.
Warm weather.
Yeah.
But in New York City, in the wintertime, what are you supposed to do?
And that's
do a whole bunch of this.
And I like basketball. I always played basketball since I was a kid. And I'm like, in the winter, like, especially as a kid, I had no outlets. What I'm gonna send up to the YMCA and pay money that I don't have as a kid, bro.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask them. My parents are not gonna do that.
From 1 hour to 2 hours.
Yeah, my parents are not gonna do that. Yeah. So there's no outlet. Maybe there could be more domes or, like you said, access to public schools. Maybe they should have 3-hour recreation on Saturdays, maybe, you know?
Exactly.
Whether catered to whatever sport it is.
And I think the weekend thing is a good start. I would love to see it every day though, because not only does that create jobs for people, it creates funding for schools as well. I would like to think so, because what are exactly that are these schools spending money on? The sports equipment? Okay, maybe. But if you create a facility or use those facilities for specific reasons, you never know what type of basketball players come out of, because those gyms are available. It takes the kids out of the
And I feel like the public schools should also look at schools as also part of the community.
Yeah,
because I feel like
this a hub.
Because there's times it seems that the schools are like its own separate entity. Like I said, like we mentioned, like why not open the gyms on Saturdays? Maybe have staff there. Maybe there's staff that want to work extra hours. Now you incentivize people working more.
Yeah.
And you incentivize kids staying away from the streets.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody wins from that aspect, Maybe you have coaches that do coaching classes on weekends. Maybe you charge a fee. Maybe a portion goes to the coach, portion goes to the school.
Yeah.
Everybody wins.
Or they rent the space as well for different events, whether they want to pay freaking pickleball or something, or cricket, or
Like for me,
dodgeball or something like that.
like you went to what school you went to again?
I went to for high school. I went to George Washington.
So for example, I went to Roosevelt High School in the Bronx by Fordham University, right? So for me, my school, after school from like 3:30 to 5:30, we had something called recreation, and they let us play basketball, supervised with a gym teacher. And I feel like that was amazing that we even had the opportunity. I think it was 2 to 3 times a week. And those are 2 to 3 hours that I didn't have to be in the street. And if I didn't want to go home and I want to stay in school and be productive, I can play. Not many schools, I don't think, had that opportunity or teachers willing to do that. Did you have something like that in your school?
I had something similar. Not in high school, but in middle school, I had something called Learning Lab, but it was very academically based.
Okay.
But the reason why they implemented that was because in New York City nowadays, I don't know if you've seen this trend, but there's a lot of multiple schools in one building.
Oh yeah, my school's like that. Yeah.
Your school's like that.
Big schools.
I feel like it's extremely common now, and I despise that. When you compare it to schools like in Florida, for example, it's all just one school. But the reason why they kept us in Learning Lab, like that extra hour of extracurricular activities, was because they didn't want to have the dismissal all at once.
Yeah.
Because that could create conflicts with different schools, the maturity, the gang banging, whatever the case is. So that was the excuse behind it. But then again, it was never something that was like sports based. It was more academically based, which I understand because not everybody's athletic. But I do feel like,
but not everybody's also academic either. And that's also a flow within itself.
Exactly.
Like for example, you can provide cooking classes, you can provide music classes, theater. There's a lot of interest. I have interest in some of those things. Learning how to cut wood and what's that called again?
Like learning how to cook wood?
Like carpenting and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Like there's schools that have that in the South, like you can learn that, learning how to do electrical work, HVAC, because at the end of the day, not everybody wants to go to college, and college is not for everyone. So why not have different outlets? Why you have to force kids to learn certain subjects that they likely will not apply in the future, instead of having them learn the skill, maybe whether that is accounting, whether that is learning how to do your own taxes. You know how many Americans do not know how to do their own taxes, including myself? We have to rely on TurboTax. We have to rely on accountants. There's no reason we shouldn't know how to do our own taxes. And the school systems, maybe they could provide that,
I was going to ask you a different question. I totally forgot what it was, but it had something in regards to that. But you had a great point. Like, teach them realistic things. Oh, this is actually going to be my question. And if you guys agree, please feel free to comment below. This might be a hot take. But I remember as I was learning like trigonometry, geometry, and like pre-calculus and calculus and so on, not everybody that goes to college ends up having to take those courses.
I agree, yeah.
There has, and I stand firm on this, 100%. There has not been one time in my life that I had to apply something that I learned in calculus onto my daily life.
Wow.
There has not been anything. As long as I know how to manage my own finances and make sure that my bills are paid and make sure that, I can calculate certain percentages and taxes, stuff like that, those are things that I feel like I need to learn. But like all the stuff that they're teaching in terms of like pre-calculus, like why do I need to know why?
Like the advanced placement courses.
I never actually had to apply that. Like, there are certain sciences that intrigue me in terms of like environmental studies and stuff like that I ended up learning about cells and stuff like that. That was very important.
But I think some of that should be choice based too. I feel like the learning system should be catered to what the student ideally wants to be when they grow up.
Is that not what college is for, though?
Yeah, but then by college, it could also be too late, though, because that's also the reason why there's many kids that drop out of college and they have debt too.
But here's the other thing too: even if they don't stop at high school, like let's say if they want to continue on going to college, you still have to take electives, and that's generic curricular.
But that's choice based, though.
I'm sorry. Well, not all electives are. For example, you will have to complete like 20 credits of electives.
Yeah.
And these electives can be anywhere from like speech to English literature. Yeah. That's choice based as to what you want to learn. But if I'm somebody who is studying to be I don't know, let's say if I want to study acting, why do I have to take an elective on math? Why does that have to be something that that essentially is a choice? The math, I have to choose it.
Because remember, you have the core classes that are catered to your major, then you have the elective courses.
So then, why elective courses necessary is my point. Then it just
because I think from their perspective, they want you to get a foundation from different areas too, for cognitive thinking, critical skills. and those kind of things. Like for example, I'm a business major, but I also took an elective in theater. That's one of my. I had fun in that class. You
It's
know
one
what
of
I
my
mean?
favorite courses
But it
too.
was a
Yeah,
choice. I didn't have to do
yeah,
that.
I agree.
But I was glad that I was given that choice. Where in high school, I didn't have that choice. I just had to take what they offer. And like you mentioned a point about the divisions in schools, especially in New York City. I believe it was in the early 2000s, around 2002 or so, that they started divided the schools because the violence is so bad in the 90s in schools. Everybody was conjoined under like one principle, one set of rules. So they felt like it was better to divide the schools and have different like leadership. There's a pro and a con to it. The pro is that I think it did help in terms of violence, gangs, but
Controlling the environment
but
and
I
all
think
that.
it creates a lot of divisions, and at the end of the day, it hurts the students. Because, for example, right, my baseball team in high school represented the whole campus, the school itself, but I was a part of one school out of the 6 schools inside. So, for example, me looking back now in hindsight, I didn't really know the whole school. I didn't know everybody that went. Like I've seen people, but I didn't get to know them because we couldn't go to their floor or vice versa.
Same.
It limits who are your peers. I was only with people in my school only, you know, and the only time I meet people that are new is either if I play in the baseball team or after school activities, you know what I mean? But on a day to day, I didn't get to know as many people, and I feel like that kind of limits your growth in a sense. Because what if you met somebody, and it doesn't have to be a relationship, but somebody that could have influenced you, or somebody that could have been a role model to you, or someone that you could have gotten along and created a business or something together. You never know, you know. And I feel like by dividing the schools also limits the resources that each school gets allocated by funds too, instead of the school as a totality. You know what I mean?
I agree.
So it depends how you look at it. But it does impact the way a student gets their learning too.
I think it contributes to them being closed-minded. I agree with what you
Yeah.
said. Like my school was the same way. In George Washington, we had a health floor, a floor based on like law. I was in the business side, so I can relate with you when it comes down to that.
Hmm.
And it kept me very closed-minded. And then going into so on a personal aspect, I went to high school at George Washington where I studied business and finance. And truth be told, actually, fun fact, I didn't learn anything about business and finance. I'm gonna be very
Oh
honest.
man.
And then as I got into college, I feel like anything that I didn't learn in high school, I wanted to apply it in college because essentially that was like my second chance of learning business and finance. I started learning business administration and I hated it, business management and I hated it. And I learned into business marketing and I ended up liking it a lot better because it was actually easier than the other two curriculums. And by the time I graduated with my degree in business marketing, I was kind of exhausted of it. Now, as I got older, I'm looking at like detective crime and different things like that on YouTube. And that has sparked an interest in me that I didn't even know I had up until now. And I'm 29 years old.
Yeah.
So I feel like it kept me very close minded. I just don't like that New York City schools tend to do that now.
Yeah.
I really don't. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it at all.
I do have a few regrets in my childhood that I feel like if I had a do over, I would change in terms of like school selections, not leaving when I probably should have left. So there's something that I'm kind of upset. Like I feel like in a way, like I'm glad that I was able to, hey, graduate from school, man. But in middle school and high school, I feel like in a sense my school failed me, and the reason why so they failed me is because they knew that I played baseball in middle school. They knew I played baseball in high school. They knew I was one of the best players in the city for that time period. Shit, I got my jersey retired from my school, and I
Wow.
played 3 years in varsity. I didn't play 4 years. I wish I should have played four. I kind of made a mistake there in the first. I didn't play freshman year. I kind of feel a little intimidated, but that's probably because when I first came to America to New York, I skipped a grade, so I was already mentally still younger than most of my peers, and that's a transition period between like from a young kid to a teenager, puberty. You know, a lot of emotions. So the failure is if they know that I was really that talented with baseball, they knew that I was a good student, but I like baseball. That was probably my dream. Why not cater a plan to make that more of a reality for me from a guidance counselor's point of view, from a teacher's point of view? Yo, this kid is really nice. Why not have us take initiative to reach out to certain schools to have this kid go to them?
Did did your coach not do that?
No,
You
and
did not do that?
I appreciate my coach a lot. Like I still keep in contact with him. But nah, they didn't do that.
That's
And
shocking.
I wish,
Wow.
I don't know if it was lack of funds, lack of ideas, but they failed me in that aspect. Like I felt like why if I'm one of the top, what was it, top 40 players in NYC in 2013, 2014, why am I not getting recruited? Why are schools not knowing about me? You know what I mean? If I'm leading in a lot of categories in baseball, why are people not knowing about me? Because I'm only a kid. I can only know as much as I know as a kid. I don't have the mind as a bit. I don't have the business mind being 16, 17, 15 years old, you know?
Yeah.
These are the responsibilities of adults that they should have that, especially when they see a kid that has talent and has promise and has a good background, you know what I mean?
I agree.
And that's kind of my biggest like backlash a little bit in regards to the school system. Like, why not have that care, you know? Like, why not have reach out for scholarships? Why not consider giving me different options that are realistic? Oh, maybe you can play baseball here. Because think about it, if I get signed and I get drafted, the publicity goes back to the school.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe the program gets more funding for the sports program.
I think
you know?
it's because I think part of it is because the schools in general might look at that very like pessimistically. Like they're not looking at that as like, oh, this kid actually has a shot.
But that's bad because then you're not believing in the kid's dreams either.
Exactly, and like I'm shocked to see that your coach didn't assist you with that. Because, like George Washington had at the time Steve Mandel, who was known for that.
Well, you guys have a tremendous baseball program.
Baseball program, but you know, for better or worse,
yeah,
you know, there are other things that I don't even dive into as to what he did wrong. But you know, essentially, you know, they're supposed to guide you in that direction. But I think that the schools more or less want you to just focus more on academics because that's a more realistic possibility. But to your point, what if the student is not academically gifted and doesn't want to pursue that?
You set it into failure in a sense.
Yeah.
You're not expanding their interests or what they want. Like, for example, like in hindsight, if I remove myself from the equation and I look at myself from a third person as an adult, looking back at my former self, I feel like there's no way possible that this kid, speaking in third person of myself, should not be looked after as like that can have a promising, successful future. You know, like for example, if I was an adult looking after myself, there's no way I don't let this talent go to waste. You know what I mean? Right. That's how I looked at it, and it's not me trying to be cocky of myself. I'm just really confident of the skills that I provided. I'm confident of the feedback that I've gotten, not just from my father, but from coaches from different leagues that I played in, from people that casually were passing by and they stuck by to just see that I was either hitting or pitching or playing, and they were intrigued by me. Like there's times that coaches came up to me and then they want me to play for their team. You know what I mean? So if that can happen and they appreciate and see my talent, why can it have been done in the education system? You know, or the adult figures in my life at the time. You know, like coaches, guidance counselors, league owners, parents, everything, bro.
And this is why I actually I wanted to segue into how we met in Van Cortlandt Park, which is the league on 252nd and Broadway here in New York City.
Yeah.
I'm much more appreciative of a league like Van Cortlandt because I felt like I really got the boost in terms of publicity because of that league. Anything that I missed in high school or in other leagues that I played in, I felt like Van Cortlandt and leagues like that helped propel me. That league provided showcases, and they provided training, which was, I don't know if you remember, but it was like
summer camps.
Summer camps.
I used to be in there.
Yeah, right.
We were like 9 to like 1 p.m. or something.
9 to 2.
And then we'll go to the pool after, and then a game later.
Yeah, the good days. So, and this was back like when we weren't focused as like video games or like social media and stuff like that. Like we were outside. We didn't really have phones.
No.
To this day,
that's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
So like these leagues provide showcases. They provide, you know, they call scouts. They put you in the best situation possible to be successful. And I'm much more grateful for Van Cortlandt for providing that service. And other leagues too, like Gotham's was one of them. That a lot of like the it kids in New York City tend to go towards those leagues and stuff like that, which is really, really fun. But for better or worse, a lot of those leagues was more about, all those teams, those travel teams was more about like me.
Yeah, and it's also like my biggest gripe also with summer leagues too, like as much as I have appreciated them, is that it felt very favoritism based. So
really true.
I felt like me as a kid, I wasn't the most vocal kid, like in terms of speaking about myself. And I also didn't have I didn't have a father where comparing it to other fathers, where he's like, for lack of better word, like an ass kisser. because that's how you get. Like honestly, like to get by in society, you kind of gotta be an ass kisser, bro. Like fuck the pride, bro. You just gotta be.
You have to be.
You have to remove the pride, your ego, and ask if you need to ask, or put yourself in rooms that you may not be at if you don't carry that personality, you know. And that's something that I feel like I have lacked as a kid, and maybe I missed some opportunity or looks because of that.
Let me ask you a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Was that approach because you felt like, how can I phrase this question? Did you feel like that approach that you had in terms of not being vocal, it was like more about like you just want to let your play speak for itself?
Yeah, I think it was mostly based. I wanted my play to speak for itself, but I noticed over time that
you needed to vouch for yourself.
You also need the voice aspect of your play. You know what I mean?
You need to push, and understandable. Like for the kids that are playing nowadays, I don't think there's anything bad with trying to put yourself in a situation where you need to like be vocal or promote yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you look at nowadays, if there's anything that social media has provided, is the fact that the more you promote yourself, the more successful you seem to be.
Yeah.
I'm seeing these kids nowadays with like social media pages,
as you should,
where they're graduating 2032 or 2026 or whatever the case is, and they have their parents promoting those pages and stuff like that. And you know what? Those are the kids that we hear about. Example, Bryce Harper. His parents helped propel him to where he's at today. I mean, he had the skill level, but he had to go up being the #1 pick and nothing less. Anything less than that, he would have been considered a failure in his eyes. But he had his father and his mom promote him. They put him on Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
And it's like, I respect that. You know, there's the other side of the coin. If we look at like the examples of like the Wander Francos of the world. Look at Wander Franco. You know, he grew up in a baseball family. He might have been favored in certain situations where he might have gotten a little bit more balls to hit when it comes down to batting practice. He might have gotten a little bit more ground balls hit his way